Hello everyone and welcome to this video tutorial from blendercookie.com. My name is Jonathan Williamson and today I'm going to take you through all the steps necessary to sculpt a human head in Blender 2.59. Now this is mostly relevant to Blender 2.5 regardless of which version you're using, but we're going to be using 2.59 today since it's the latest official release. And what I'm going to take you through is how to sculpt a human head, in this case a man's head, from nothing more than the default cube. Now we could use a base mesh or anything like that to actually use our starting point to get a little closer to the shape that we want, but I want to use a cube today because it's a good way to practice using a lot of tools that maybe you otherwise wouldn't use, such as the grab brush, the draw brush, and other brushes like that that will help us get the form that we need from nothing more than a default cube. So I'm also going to be focusing on a lot of anatomy today as far as anatomical rules on how to proportion the head, where to place the eyes, where to place the ears, things like that that will help you understand how to create your own head regardless of whether you have any references on hand, whether you have any modeling sheets or anything like that. And hopefully will get you to help get you to the point where you can jump in and just sculpt a head, from your mind, no problem. Now, we're not going to be looking at or focusing on tons of detail today. We're not going to be sculpting anything like, individual hair strands or pores in the skin, anything like that. We're mostly going to be focusing on the anatomical surfaces to better understand how to sculpt a head in general. Once you get to that point, then you can start worrying about the fine details. So, to get started, I want to go ahead and take the cube, and we're just going to start by adding in a multi-resolution modifier to this, and we can just choose it from the modifier menu, multi-resolution. And at that point, or once added, I'm going to go ahead and just click subdivide just twice for the time being to get us a good starting point, and this will give us just enough geometry to go ahead and shape the head to get some basic understanding of the form and, start getting away from just the sphere form that we now have. The next thing that I want to do is go ahead and turn off the manipulator handles, because the manipulators are just going to be obnoxious when we're working with in sculpt mode. And so I'm just going to hit Control Space, or I can toggle the manipulator handles down here, and then I can just go ahead, switch into sculpt mode, and start sculpting. But before I do that, first off, I want to go ahead and zoom in on my head, so that we can actually see what we're doing. And I want to go ahead and enable symmetry from the toolbar on the left side. So we can just tap symmetry and just go ahead and choose the X mirror option. This way, when we sculpt on one side of the head, our results will be applied to the other side, very similar to a mirror modifier. The next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get rid of the grid that you see here. I really don't need it, and it's really just distracting when I want to focus on my model. So I'm just going to hit N to bring up the Properties panel, choose Display, and turn off the grid floor. I can hit N to close that, and I can begin sculpting. So the first thing that I want to do is go ahead and get the basic shape of a human head. And the basic shape that we're looking at, if you imagine a head looking at it from the side, so a profile view, is we need to be sure to add in the full skull shape along with all the flesh on top of it. And a skull is really shaped if you imagine two eggs sitting on top of or kind of intersecting each other, with one egg going down like this for the front of the face and another egg going like this for the back of the head. Now this is not quite to scale, this bottom one's a little too large, but here we have the kind of the cranium of the skull, and then we have the actual face portion. And so that's what we want to go ahead and try and get. And I'm going to be using the grease pencil a lot today while showing you, things like where to place the eyes, where to place the ears. And so I'll try and make, as good of use of the tool as I can. But for the time being, let's go ahead and hit G to switch over to our grab brush. And then I'm going to hit F to scale up my brush fairly large like this, and then I'm just going to start pulling this shape down. I can just grab a little bit at a time by just left clicking or left click and dragging, and I'll go ahead and keep my grease pencil strokes on here so I can use them as a nice reference because they work pretty well. And I'm not going to worry about the neck too much just yet. I'll add that in a little bit when I have a little bit more geometry to work with. For the time being, I might give just a subtle hint of it, just about like that, but really not too much. And that looks pretty good. So now I want to go ahead and look at it from the front view. So I can hit 1 to go to my front view, and we can definitely see it's a little bit off. And so maybe I'll, pull this in just a little bit. If this is the jawline, you can kind of imagine that the corners of the jaws and the cheekbones are about the widest point of the the front portion of the face, and so maybe this is the cheekbone right about here. This would be about the corner of the jaw, and we can bring this down a little bit, maybe make it slightly less pointy. You know, again, we're not working with very many polygons at this point, and so we want to, you know, we're just approximating this, and so you just really have to kind of visualize this entire head here. And my cranium is definitely too small. Really, it ought to be something a little bit more like this probably. And so I'm going to go ahead and just pull this out, switching back to the grab brush. And the grease pencil, if you're not familiar with it, you can draw if you hold down D, and then you can draw with just left click and drag, or if you hold down D and right click and drag, you can erase strokes. It's a really handy tool for, you know, doing things like this. And that starts to look pretty good from the top view. Notice that, you know, the center of the head here has not come out as far as I would like it to. And so I'll pull that out just a little bit, you know, just kind of smoothing things out. You might then pull it back. And that looks pretty good. When we're working from a cube like this, we want to be sure to do as much work as we can on each subdivision level before increasing it. This is not always the case in other sculpting applications, but in Blender, Blender does not work very well when going down from a division. Blender really only lets you work on the highest subdivision level on your model, or else you're going to cause all kinds of problems. And, you know, if you don't know what I'm talking about, just go ahead and try it. I'm sure you'll find out pretty quick. You know, just go down a level, sculpt, and then go back up, and you'll find what I mean. In this case, you know, we're done with this level, so let's go ahead and subdivide, add another one, and we'll start doing a little bit more shaping at this point. I want to go ahead and begin positioning or putting in things like, you know, the subtle indication of where the nose and the eyes will be. But before I do that, let me go ahead and talk about where they're going to be on the head. I'm also going to reposition my cursor at the center, just because that controls where my grease pencil strokes are currently, since they're set to cursor. So from edit mode, I just hit Shift C. Now I'll go back to sculpt mode. And I'm actually going to change my grease pencil setting to surface now, such that I can actually draw on the head itself. And what I want to do now is show you where the eyes, the nose, the mouth, the ears, and such are. And the first thing that we want to locate are the eyes. The eyes are located, in general, you know, there's always a little bit of variation in nature and with humans and whatnot, but as a good rule of thumb, the eyes are always located almost exactly in the center of the head. And if we look at our grid, we can see that the top of the head is right at 1 blender unit, or maybe that's 1 blender unit, and the bottom is just a little bit below -1 blender unit. And so our eyes are going to be just a little bit below the x-axis origin there, and so, you know, we can imagine one eye is going to be right about in here, and maybe one eye is right about in there for the top of them, and then, you know, the bottom half of the eye, bottom half of the eye, so right about in there. Then if we take something from the top of the eye here, actually let me undo that, show that, and that. Okay, if we take a line from the top of the eye, about like this, to the lowest point of the chin, which will really be right about there once we finish sculpting things, the bottom of the nose is then located exactly in the center. So we can imagine it's going to be right about in here. And then if you go from here to here, then the mouth or the top of the lip or center of the lips are located about 1/3 up from the bottom. And so we can imagine that's going to be right about in here for about the center or so of the lips. You know, obviously we can have a little bit of variation in there, but that's going to be about where they're at. And next for the ears are located in general, or the front edge of the ear is just about at the halfway point from the front to the back of the skull. So the ears is going to be, you know, right about in here for the front of the ear, and also the top of the ear lines up with the top of the eye, so then the top of the ear is going to be right about in here, and the bottom of the earlobe lines up about with the bottom of the nose. And so we can, imagine the ear will be somewhere in here. And there we go. Well, there's a slightly better ear. Okay. And so that'll give us a good approximation of where things are at. Then, you know, we've got the neck muscles coming down like this. We've got the jawbone coming through and all that kind of stuff. So this allows us to give us a good kind of starting point for where things are. And apologies for my very rough grease pencil drawing. Also, one more thing, the head is 5 eyes wide, and so if we imagine one eye is about like this, then we've got one eye in between them, another eye, and then one more, and one more. So that gives a good indication of how to gauge the width of the eyes. Okay, let's go ahead, and I'm going to use my draw brush now, and I'm going to just draw in some basic indication of the nose here. Again, very basic, literally. We don't have a whole lot to work with. I might switch over to the grab brush and do something like this. It's just to start getting some of the polygons out in that general direction. I might pull out a little bit for the eyebrows, and I might pull out a tiny bit right in here to start indicating the eyebrows and the cheekbones. Maybe I'll pull in the chin just a little bit more, pull this out, pull a little bit out for the mouth, a little bit in there, and that starts to look pretty good. Okay, I can go ahead and maybe turn down the opacity of the grease pencil strokes so they're not quite as distracting, and maybe I'll delete some of these in here, about like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add in a new subdivision level, and again, using the draw brush, I'm just going to start kind of pushing in a few areas. I might hit Shift F and bring out the strength a little bit so it's not quite as strong. Push some things out right in here. If you need to smooth things, you can use the smooth brush by just holding down Shift and drawing. That'll temporarily activate the smooth brush. If you hold down Control, you can draw in the negative direction or subtract from your model rather than add to the model. And again, we're really just barely putting in some subtle indication of all of our different shapes. So, just a little bit here, a little bit there. We don't have a lot of mesh to work with, and so there's not even a whole lot we can do. But by just working little bit by little bit, we're able to go in and really start to refine this as we go. And, once you do this a good few times, you'll start to find that things start to work really nicely. Okay, a little bit there for the jawbones. I might push in a little bit behind the jawbone. I could go ahead and bring down a little bit of the neck muscle, or a little bit of the neck. So maybe I'll just use my grab brush, start to pull this down. Something about like that. I'm not going to be sculpting too much on the neck, just enough to kind of show the indication of it, not to make the head look all stumpy. Maybe I'll smooth this out just a little bit more. Bring this down here. Something about like that. And about like that. Maybe smooth this. I might now use my clay brush by hitting C. The clay brush is really good anytime you want to build up form. It works basically by taking the sections that are underneath the brush and adding volume to them, basically until all the areas immediately under the brush have approximately the same amount, and then starts to add to those. And so building up form on top of another surface is really easy with it. And here I'm really just with the neck, the anatomy of the neck and whatnot definitely depends a good bit on obviously what the pose is on the neck. But in this case, the main thing that I want to get are the muscles in the neck, and so I want to just get some very subtle indication of those things. Maybe I pulled that out a bit too far. That starts to look pretty good. I really can't do too much with the neck right now just because I don't have enough geometry, but I think it's time to go ahead and add in another loop. I'm also going to go ahead and save my file. So, having done that, I'll go ahead and hit subdivide to add one more level. And now using the clay brush again, I'm going to go ahead, or actually, not using the clay brush yet. I'm going to go ahead and use the crease brush, which the crease brush can be activated by hitting Shift-C or by choosing it from the brush options. And just very lightly, I'm going to go in and just kind of draw around all my main details. And I just noticed I put my eyes a little bit too low there, so I'm just going to raise them up using the grab brush. So using the crease brush and a fairly small size and fairly light strength, I'm going to go in and just start drawing around the main details. And what this then allows me to do is, just starts to bring in a few more polygons around where I want them, because the crease brush works by basically both pinching and cutting in the polygons. So you'll notice as I draw this in, it pulls them closer together and pushes them down. And so it works really great for kind of outlining details. You want to be careful with it. You don't want to do too much, but when used correctly, it really does work really well. It's really good for kind of adding in outlines almost. I might also go ahead and, if the skull connects to the head right here, then this is where the muscle is going to come down for this muscle here. So I'll bring them down. And one thing I'm not going to do today is I'm not going to spout a bunch of muscle names and anatomy terms and things like that at you. Half because I don't know all of them, but also because that's not wholly what we're focused on today. Yes, if you know the muscle terms, sure, it will benefit you. If you can name all the different muscles you're sculpting and know exactly how they're shaped. But more importantly today is understanding how those muscles affect the skin, how they're shaped, how everything connects together. Little things like the fact that all muscles intersect, versus just meet up with one another. Knowing the proportions of the head and all that kind of stuff, and how you can then utilize all that knowledge to then sculpt in a nice human head. So again, I'm not going to be spouting, names or anything like that, partially because I'm not familiar enough with those names, but again, also just because for what we're doing, it's not completely important. Okay, now after using the crease brush, I'm going to go ahead and use the clay brush to just kind of push in a few areas, kind of pull out a few, just slowly build up volume. If you notice that the clay brush isn't letting you build up enough volume, it may help to add the accumulate brush or option. Just allows you to continuously draw in one section over and over without having to release your drag and still have the brush affect the surface. Okay, just little bits at a time here. Another thing on the nose is, you'll notice that this is my eyes and such are a little bit off center from the head. That was just because I didn't position it quite right. But you'll notice if I go into object mode, position that, then that looks about right. I'm not going to worry about that. Just be aware of that as I sculpt. If things don't match exactly, that's why. But the thing with the nose, the edge of the nostrils come just about to the inside edge of the pupil, and so they're going to come about to right here and about to right here. And so the nose is actually, particularly on men, not as much on women. Women tend to have a slightly slimmer nose. The nose is actually a good bit wider than you might expect it to be. Okay, crease these or pinch these in just a little bit. I'll pinch the bottom of the nose in, and maybe a little bit more around the brows, and that starts to look pretty good. I kind of like where that's going. I might go ahead and add in a bit more volume here around the neck. Bring this down. These are the neck muscles here that come down to a kind of a point at the neck to then meet up with the clavicle and such. But I won't do too much more with that until I've got more resolution. And I'm going to go ahead and add in another level here so that I can keep sculpting. And I want to first go ahead and use my crease brush again. And I'm just going to crease in a few of these things, like right between the brows for the nose, just like that. I might crease around the corner of the brow there, maybe the top of the eyelid just about, the bottom of the eyelid just a little bit. I might go ahead and draw down around the eyelid kind of sac of sorts, that comes in right about here above the cheekbones. Might add in a little bit more volume here, a little bit more volume here. Just kind of using the clay brush here, draw these muscles around the mouth. I'll go ahead and add in, using my crease brush, draw in the basic shape for the top lip and the bottom, or the lips coming in on here. Then I can use my clay brush, build up a bit more volume around those lips, something a little bit like that. And then the bottom lip, generally you just see just a little bit of it, and then you've got generally a valley underneath the bottom lip where you can really see it protruding a little bit, something about like that. From the side view, I might bring up my grab brush, scale it up a bit, and pull back the corners of the mouth just a little bit, Something about like that. There we go. I want to go ahead and sculpt in, or use my crease brush again to draw in these forms right in here. These are the muscles below the lip that tend to form this kind of almost like pouting look, but then also you've got the chin coming down around it, and definitely some important features to get in for the mouth to really get the correct effect. The other thing that I want to really focus on early on is the small fold at the corner of the mouth. This is probably one of the most important things to get right as far as getting the mouth correct. And you know, it's just this little bit of fold of muscle and skin that forms at the corner of the mouth, goes up towards the nostril, and then is bordered by another fold generally right next to it that then continues all the way up then onto or right at the nostril. Okay, so we've got those. You know, again, we can't do too much at this level just because we don't have the polygons there, but we want to just continue to be sure that we're sculpting everything correctly. And right now you'll notice that my cheekbones are really protruding way too far, and so I can just use my grab brush, pull this all in, something like that, and then go in and then just pull the nose out a bit further, add a little bit of arch to the nose, pull this back. Maybe I'll pull this back. You know, this ought to be a nice kind of curve right in here. Maybe the chin needs to come out a bit further. The top lip ought to come out a bit further. And immediately that starts to look a little better. I can bring the forehead up just a little bit here at the top and around the brows. I can bring the center of that there in just a little bit more. Start sculpting in around the eyes. I want to make sure that the nose, this muscle here, is nice. It's a nice soft transition from the bridge of the nose out to the muscles that go down for the cheeks and such. I want to be sure to get that in nicely. Okay, that starts to look pretty good. One of the main things on the head is, of course, to always keep looking at it from all different angles, or else you're going to definitely see that, you know, things aren't how you expect them to be. Start sculpting in the brow ridges up like this. Starts to look fairly good. You know, one of the nice things about sculpting too is that we're able to really just build up our forms and really adjust them as we go along very easily. You know, we're not, by sculpting in a shape, we're not really locking ourselves into it. You know, we never really are with modeling, but maybe less so with sculpting than with other styles in a way, just because we've got the ability to really push and pull the mesh around. You maybe want to pull this in just a bit, something about like that. Starts to look good. This is maybe too much there, so I'll just pull that in closer. We don't want it to look too much like an alien head. There we go. Looks pretty good. I might go ahead and crease in around the edge of the ears just a little bit, and I'm going to use my draw brush. If you want to raise surface, it's generally good to use the draw brush versus the clay brush. The clay brush is good for building up volume and such on a surface that's already raised, but if you just need to completely raise a surface, I generally recommend using the draw brush. You know, maybe smooth that back a little bit. You know, I just want to start to get it pushed out. You know, I don't really have the geometry there to do much with it just yet, but starting to get it out really will give me a head start. Something about like that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and add in another subdivision layer and keep working. I'm going to use the clay brush now, and this is actually the point where I really like to bring in what's generally referred to as a clay strips brush. And a clay strips brush is basically nothing more than a maximum brush that just affects everything rather than a smooth influence. And the way that this is normally done is by importing a white plane as a texture and using a maximum curve. But if you just, under the curve on the brush, if you just go to a maximum curve so there's no drop or fade out, you tend to get the same kind of effect. The main thing that you don't get is you don't get the square edges. And in this case, for the time being, that's okay. Some people prefer the round, some people prefer the square. It's really up to you. But the main thing is that it allows us to get this really nice kind of sketchy feel, and really feels very similar to sculpting with actual clay when using the actual clay brush. And, it's not for everyone, but a lot of us really like it just because it feels more natural and feels like we're actually, working with an actual substance rather than just a digital creation. And so, for some people that really helps. One thing I want to do is, one thing on the bridge of the nose is there's a sharp ridge right here as far as, it catches the light. And it's more prominent on men than it is on women, but adding in those kinds of little details early on and being aware of them will definitely help you get a good feeling. The brows of the eyes are shaped kind of like a nice, like half an S curve, where it starts up here, goes down, goes up, and then back down and around the eye, and kind of then with a triangular shape right up here, something about like that combined with that. Helps to get, the muscle shape in here, plus the actual bone ridge, and then we've got kind of, two big muscles right in here that we want to sculpt in, and that was far too strong. You will want to be careful about the strength of your clay brush. It can get overwhelmed pretty quickly. And make good use of your smooth brush as well. Don't be afraid to use it by just holding down your shift key. On the nose is really kind of formed by three spheres. If you imagine one sphere here for the side nostril, and one sphere, oops, that's way too small, one larger sphere for the tip of the nostril, and maybe this one's a little small too, and those intersecting, then you're going to see, a point right here where they intersect, the ridge around them, including right in here for the tip of the nostril. And so doing that, can really help you get a very natural nose shape very easily. One of the easiest ways to learn anatomy is definitely imagine everything in the body based on, shapes, on geometric shapes, where maybe an arm is a box, and then the forearm is a triangle that connects to the box. And, just kind of finding a way to visualize all the different elements of the head, or, well, not just the head, but any portion of the body as a simple shape will allow you to then translate that into 3D much easier. A really great book as far as learning anatomy that I found to be absolutely invaluable is the Atlas of a Human Anatomy for the Artist by, I believe it's Stephen Peck. Just really a truly phenomenal book. You can get it on Amazon for, I think, between $12 and $15 US currency. Total bargain for what you get, and really, really fantastic. All the illustrations are hand drawn, using the geometric shapes as a way to illustrate all the different muscles and such. And it really is just phenomenal. Highly recommended. So here I'm, just drawing in those shapes again. This kind of comes down here. It's down here. Got the jawbone. These muscles down here, below the chin. A lot of times you might see a slight crease at the tip of the chin. Not everyone has it, but a good few people do. Might add a little bit more volume here to the lips. And particularly on, men have much more subtle lips, I guess, than women do. But on men, generally the upper lip protrudes far more than the lower lip. But even so, generally they're much more of just kind of a straight intersection, kind of like that. Whereas women, a lot of times have this really nice curve. That, I guess, the way that it's generally described as far as the sex appeal of it, not to try to get into the sex appeal or anything like that, but sometimes it is a great way to describe anatomy, is the succulent look versus then just kind of the trim, flat look of men's lips. And so that's kind of what we want to go for today. And this is maybe a little bit too flat. We can bring these out just a little bit here. Maybe bring up my draw brush because I really want to just kind of push these back a little bit. So again, anytime that you need to just push a surface one way or the other, or pull a surface out, a lot of times the draw brush is going to be your best friend, just because it works really well at just moving surfaces versus kind of building up those surfaces. And there, I used my smooth brush and maybe went a little bit too far. Trying to get that crease at the corner of the mouth that I was talking about, which connects up here and then goes down. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and, just so that we can start to see this a little better, I'm going to bring in the eyes, and the way that I'm going to do this, I'm going to go into object mode, jump up my levels a little bit so that I can see my head here in object mode. And I'm going to hit Shift A, add in a mesh and a UV sphere. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit Tab to go into edit mode. I'm going to scale this sphere down to be about like that. You can adjust it a little bit. And then I'll go and hit R, X, 90 to go rotate around the X-axis 90 degrees and hit Enter. I can then hit move it over along the X-axis to be about where the eye would position, somewhere right about in there. I'll go and add in a mirror modifier, and then I'll hit Tab to leave edit mode. I'm going to hit 3 to go to side view and just position the eye somewhere about like this. And that looks about right. Men's eyes are generally set back a little further than women's eyes, and it's not just a matter that they're set back, it's also that their brow ridges and things like that are stronger, and so it, definitely gives the impression that they're a little bit more set back. And a good way to position the eyes, once you've got your brows and your cheekbones mostly set up, is if you just hold your finger, assuming you're a man, or even women too, because this is mostly true across the board, less so in Asian descents and other cultures and such, but definitely within the Caucasian. And if you just hold your finger up to your cheekbone and your eyebrow, and you'll notice that your eyeball should just barely touch your finger as it touches the brow and the eye and the cheekbone. And so basically they form a nice even line just about like this. And so we actually maybe need to bring our cheekbones in just a little bit, although this may be all right, because it's not always going to be like that. We can have a little bit of play, but that looks to be just about correctly positioned. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that. Notice I also added in a subsurf modifier to the eye just to smooth it out, and I'll go ahead and set the shading to be smooth. I'm also going to go ahead and bring it in towards the x-axis just a little bit more, about like that. I'll now go back to the head, switch into sculpting mode again, save my file, and now using my clay brush, I'm just going to increase my strength a bit, and then I'm just going to start building up this basic form for the eyelids, for the bottom and the top, about like that. Then I'll switch over to my crease brush real quick and draw in, maybe increase the strength, draw in this form around here, this form right in here for the crease of the uppermost portion of the top eyelid. And then I can go ahead, and if I hold down control with my crease brush, I can actually pull in a ridge and push them out rather than push them, or pull them out rather than push them in, and that allows me to kind of sharpen up a corner of the eyelid. Okay, and one thing to keep in mind is that eyelids are definitely thicker than you might initially think. A lot of people's first mistake, or one of the common mistakes in people that are just starting out in either modeling or sculpting heads, is they make the eyebrows or the eyelids really thin, and it just looks weird. There's no better word for it. It just looks really awkward. And so, if in doubt, make them a little thicker than you think they should be. Also, on men's eyes in general, again, this is just in general because the eye shape can really have a big effect depending on, what are you trying to convey in your model. But as far as just talking about eyes in general, the bottom of men's eyelids tends to be mostly straight with just a little bit of arc in it, and then the top is more curved. Not too curved, but just a little bit. So we can kind of bring these out a little bit. I'm using my draw brush here just to pull it out just a little bit, then I'll smooth it out. Something about like that. That starts to look okay. And I think right now I'm ready to go ahead and just go up another level. I might smooth out some portions of my mesh using my smooth brush with shift. Might just smooth out some areas where I think maybe it's going to start to pinch a little bit, a little awkwardly if I were to go up. And so I'll just smooth these out just a little bit. Then I'll go ahead and subdivide, add in another level. And I'll first go in, smooth out some of those areas that got a little weird. Just make sure I'm got a good clean slate to start with, particularly down in here. That's one thing that the clay brush can definitely do, is give you some weird details that you may or may not want. But that starts to look fairly good. Right now my mouth is a little too thin, so I'm just going to pull it out just a little bit. I might also pull this out a little, pull this out, and I want to pull the upper lip in. Again, it's protruding too much. So actually what I'm just going to switch over to the smooth brush, increase my strength, and just smooth that out. And now I'm just going to go ahead and redraw it. So I'll bring in my crease brush, and I'll put in a little bit of a point there, bring it down, and then go down like that. And then I can go ahead, maybe I'll draw in right around where the bottom lip will come in, and then maybe right at this kind of divot between the nose, and then I can switch over to my clay brush and just start to draw these in a bit. Bring out the bottom lip just a little bit. Smooth the ridge there along the top. Maybe subtract with the clay brush. Just kind of push it back a little bit. And aside from the very awkward expression, which I'm going to go ahead and fix now with my grab brush, it starts to kind of come together. Smooth some of this out. There we go. That starts to look a good bit better. Again, I can smooth this out a little bit more. Bring this up through here. Pull that down. Add a bit more form in here. And a lot of this is really just about getting comfortable with just the way that the process works. It's not just a matter of getting comfortable with the tools. It really is just getting comfortable with, okay, well, how do I go about sculpting this? I know that I've got these different tools at my disposal, but how am I actually going to do it? Because really the tools are totally up to you. Many people will say the crease brush is your best friend. Just as many people will say never use the crease brush. The tools are really just entirely dependent on the artist. It's all personal preference. Personally, the way that I've showed you tonight, or the way that I'm showing you over this last little while, and now and such, I personally like. But some people may have a completely different way that they do it. Again, it's really up to you to kind of decide what works for you and what doesn't. And if you watch this tutorial and you walk away just thinking, wow, Jonathan is a complete idiot, I never would have done it that way, that's totally cool. It really doesn't matter. It again is just entirely what works for you and what works. So just play with it and keep sculpting, do a lot of it, and the main thing is just sculpt over and over and over again. If you sculpt one head and it doesn't come out any good, great. If it came out really good your first try, you honestly probably got lucky. That's not meant to discourage you, but it's just kind of the way that it works. This kind of stuff doesn't just happen the first time. It's a matter of really making it second nature and just letting it flow rather than having to fight the tools all the way along. So now that I've got that rant out of my system, I'm going to get back to sculpting in the eyes. I'm going to smooth out this area just a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and bring up my pinch brush and really pinch in the corner or the edge of the eyelids here now so that I can really start to get a nice edge on them. And the pinch brush it works like the crease brush, except that it doesn't push the vertices in. It simply just pulls everything underneath your brush together and works really good for sharpening up edges like this. Now the bottom I may have sharpened up a bit too much because the bottom eyelid is actually kind of rounded and soft, whereas then the upper eyelid is much harder and has kind of a sharp ridge to it. Let me add in a little bit of this kind of flow right down like this. Oh, I guess I don't have my grease pencil enabled. That's okay. And a bit more here. While I'm at it, I might go ahead and add in, make the nostrils here come back a little bit further. Bring up my crease brush, draw in around there. Around like that. That looks pretty good. Okay, I want to do a little bit of smoothing here and there. Okay, I feel like maybe the brows are a bit too strong right now, so I'll just go ahead and do a little work, kind of pull them down, go in here, smooth this out a bit. Starts to look pretty good. I do want to go ahead and add in some basic shape for the ear, so I'm just going to draw in the basic shape like this. This is the outer edge. Come down like this for the earlobe, and then we've got the inner edge there. I'm not going to talk too much about the anatomy of the ear today. I've got some other video tutorials out there that cover all the anatomy of the ear, and once you've got the sculpt tools comfortable, then it's just a matter of putting them to use in sculpting said ear. The tutorial in particular, my most recent one that covers the ear, is the ear portion of the female body modeling series that is in progress right now. And there's an ear section on that, and that does cover poly modeling of the ear, but as far as the anatomy is concerned, it's the same thing. And so I'm just going to, I don't want to make this tutorial run too much longer, and so I'm just going to kind of run through this fairly quickly. Something about like that. Coming down through here for this inner edge. Down like this. Maybe smooth this out a bit. Maybe I'll give him detached earlobes versus attached. Might bring this in a bit. That down. There we go. I'll bring this down here a little bit more. That down. That up. Out. Go ahead and push this in. This is for the inner ear right in here. Right about like that. pinch that or push this down too. Smooth that out. Smooth that. Bring up my clay brush. Kind of fill some of that in. Again, using the clay brush. I might go ahead and turn on my pressure sensitivity for the radius so I can go in here and add in some good variation using my tablet. Okay, looking at it from the side, I can definitely see this needs to come out a bit more. Same here. Bring that out. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my draw brush again, and I'm just going to draw around this outer edge, pull it out. Actually, you know what? Yes, I'm going to keep doing that. I'll then smooth that out a little bit. Then I want to just make sure this is nice and even here. There we go. Then I can go ahead, draw down the back side of the ear. I'm not going to worry too much about the back side of the ear today. You know, turn off the pressure sensitivity for the radius there. Pull this out a bit. Pull the inside back in. Push this in. Smooth that down. Trying to sculpt the back of the ear in here. And I'm not going to worry about it too much because you're not going to see it in most cases, but you know, we do want to make it not quite so obviously just solid. Sometimes the inflate brush can work pretty well for these kind of things. You know, just push it along the normals. Okay, again, I'm not going to do too much more, but I might grab my crease brush, pull that in around the edge, and around this edge. You know, one of the reasons I'm running into trouble here is I'm starting to run out of geometry right there. And so I can't do too much more before I raise the level again. Smooth out these areas right in here. Might have to increase my strength on my smooth brush. Pull some of this out. Might smooth a little bit of this just to kind of bring it back up, and then go in, re-sculpt it. Bring that down. The inflate brush works really good for the outer edge of the ear since it's kind of rounded and smooth. Tends to get the job done very well. Some hints of the muscle around the ear there. Oops. Work on these muscles a little bit. I'm not going to do too much more. You know, I'm starting to run a little low on memory since I'm recording at the same time. But we'll do just a little bit more right in here. Bring this in. Smooth these out. Start to get some slightly better indications of the muscles in there. Same thing right in here. Now is a good time to go ahead and switch back, not to a completely smooth clay brush, but I like to use, a rounded out one. Gives me a little bit more control over just making everything soft. The main problem with the smooth curve is you do tend to just make everything really soft. And I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people like the clay brush, or the clay strips brush as it's generally referred to. That's definitely one of the reasons I like it. It gives you a little bit of a harsher brush and keeps you from just making everything soft and fuzzy. Okay, right here on the neck, I'm going to bring this out. Tend to get kind of just this, solid form right in here. Very actually pretty squarish as far as the overall shape is concerned. Then kind of coming down and is framed by the neck muscles, which come down kind of like this. And if the clavicle were right in here, if this is the center, just let me turn this on. If this were the center, and this is the clavicle, and this is the clavicle, these would come down like this. Now, these are definitely a bit low. They ought to be more like about there and more like about there. These would come down, there'd be kind of a hole right here, and these would keep going up like that. So you can kind of just imagine that's what it's going to be. Since we're modeling a male head, one of the important things on the neck is, of course, the Adam's apple, which is, it's more prominent on men than it is on women. And so we need to go ahead, we can just add that in. We can make it, as strong or subtle as we like. In this case, I'll make it fairly strong, something like that. And I would like to do a little bit more with this, so I'll bring the brows in. They're a little too far in, and I can bring these out a bit. Smooth that. Okay, I'm bringing the crease brush, do a little bit of creasing here, creasing there, and then maybe soften it up a bit. Definitely a bit too strong. Bring that in actually a bit. This comes in like this, like so. Filled in that hole a little bit more. A lot of times, sometimes you'll have a crease here at the nose because this is actually cartilage in here and cartilage in here. And so sometimes it can help to add that little bit in there and extend this down like this with a crease kind of in the center. Sometimes just helps show, the forms a little bit better. And in that corner of the mouth, a bit more, just helps show it. Another thing you'll see is there tends to be a ridge right along the upper lip where it meets with the skin above it. And so you'll actually see, definitely when you see light hitting it, you're going to see that ridge. And so a lot of times it's good to sculpt that in just subtly, nothing much, but just enough that you'll see it. So again, might add in a bit more form in here, smooth out the top edge, and then use the crease brush to really kind of push that. And then the ridge kind of ends right in here, where then you get this little divot here and the top of the mouth, with a peak of the mouth. We might pull this out just a little bit more. Might add in a subtle crease underneath the bottom of the lip. We might smooth out this edge. Maybe just bring the clay brush in just a little bit. Fill in some of these areas, smooth out that line. And we really don't have to do too much with the back of the head, assuming the subject matter is not largely overweight or anything like that. You're not going to see a lot of detail back here. You might, with both men that are very muscular and overweight, you sometimes see the kind of lines right in here, but in this case, not very appropriate for our character. And so we really don't have to do too much at all with the back of the head. Definitely bring these in Oops, that's definitely too much. That starts to look pretty good. We can check it in perspective mode from a distance, and overall feels pretty good. Maybe the back here is, oops, too muscular. We can just bring it out just a little bit. Smooth it down a little bit. And, you know, obviously we could continue to take this quite a bit further. I'm not going to do too much more here, except maybe to go up one more level just so I can work a bit more on the eyes. You know, I'm not going to do too much more simply because I'm starting to definitely bog my computer down since I'm recording at the same time. You know, you notice it's pretty slow while I'm smoothing. The smooth brush is quite slow though as you get on to higher polygon counts. You notice the crease brush works much nicer than the smooth brush did. One thing you can do, zoom in real close on your model and you'll tend to get slightly better behavior. Just kind of creasing in the eyelids here. Crease that down. Rotate around here. Add some of that muscle, or the nice swoosh to the corner of the eye. Like that. Smooth some of this out. And something I can do too is if I hit Alt-B, I can drag around the mesh that I want, and that will help kind of improve my performance. Something like that. It doesn't generally affect it too much, but you can do a little bit. I might add in a nice crease for the fold of the eyelid. On men, this generally tends to be fairly high, and on women too sometimes. Definitely, you know, it's not so much gender specific, but it tends to almost come right down to the eyelid, uppermost portion of the eyelid when the eye is open, and then kind of fades out here at the center. And so we can get that fold in a little bit, maybe then smooth it here towards the edge, maybe bring up our crease brush, strengthen it a bit, and then really kind of push this in. Actually, maybe I won't strengthen that quite so much. Scale it down a bit more, pull it in, something about like that. Same thing here. And I'm going to just about call this a stopping point just because I'm starting to, you know, hit my memory limit here. This is one thing that you want to be aware of when sculpting heads. It is actually better to start from a base mesh in most cases when you're sculpting in Blender. The reason being is that when you start from a base mesh, you've got more control over your total model and your polygon distribution. And since Blender does not handle polygons nearly as well as applications like ZBrush and Mudbox, you know, you need as much control as you can get. And so, you know, if you can control exactly where those polygons are being added, sometimes that's, you know, definitely better. Now, the reason that I started from a cube, as I said earlier in the beginning, was because I wanted to, you know, get that chance to introduce things like the grab brush that otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be using as much if we already had most of our proportions and things like that set in stone. Here I'm just doing a little bit of work here at the corner of the eye, getting a little shape, also adding in this form right in here. Definitely very important to actually getting, you know, what feels like a mostly realistic eye. You know, it's one of those little details that nobody notices until it's not there. You know, if you look someone in the face, you don't tend to notice this little bit in the corner of the eye. But if you look at somebody's head model and you see it's not there, you immediately notice that something is wrong. Which is, of course, you know, one of those prime examples of why making a realistic head is so difficult, just because we look at it every single day, and while we may not be completely aware of all the different things that make up the human head, when those things are missing, we immediately notice that something is wrong. I'm just doing a little bit more volume work there, and I think, oh yeah, you can see now I added that little bit alone makes it a lot better. So okay, that's it for today. You know, we don't have a absolutely brilliant head or anything like that. You know, it's definitely got its fair share of problems, but I hope that maybe having watched this, you have a greater understanding of how you can go about sculpting your own heads in Blender, whether that is a human head, you know, male or female, whether it's a creature head or anything of the sorts, you know, that has a head to speak of. Hopefully this will help you out and get you on the right track. So I hope that you've enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.